Okay, so we finished up Dragon, and now we get to move on to Eldritch Trickster. Eldritch Trickster is 50 Wizardry and 50 Rogue, and the way will be open for you to explore the shadowy dealings of sorcery and become an Eldritch Trickster. Um, there's some lore about like what Eldritch Tricksters are and like how the first one came to be, and this is a cool read. Um, Their makeup requirements are pretty simple. A four-pointed star located somewhere on the face. Uh, Basically just on a cheek or on your forehead sometimes. It could be a bunch of different spots, but the color of your star is dependent upon what you concentrate in. So if you've looked at magic casting, there are spell spheres. So like charm, mana, force, and then the elements, and then there's elements in general as well. And one of the most common things that you do as a spellcaster is that you get a concentration. And so what concentration is that it's a -1 to a specific sphere, and then a +1 to every other sphere in terms of the cost of a spell. So if you have a rank 6 spell that's sorcery, or that's a fire spell, well, elements is a bad example, but a mana spell and your concentration is in mana, then you do that for an additional -1 cost. So your rank 7 spell is now a rank 6 spell. Now, all of your things that aren't mana become +1. So if you have a rank 7 fire spell, that now becomes a 8 cost. So you're like very much trying to get a specific type of spell or a specific concentration of spells down to lower costs, right? And we talked about that a bit when we talked about Avatar and Wizardry in episode 105, I think, where like you concentrate into like you will eventually concentrate into a specific set of spells most of the time, because getting certain things down to one cost that are like there's ways to get a rank 6 spell down to costing only one for you, and then people will just do that one spell a bunch. It's very easy to get the elements down because there's a weird concentration with elements where if you go into a specific element, you get the same benefit as a regular concentration, but it's -2 and +2 respectively to the other things. So it's easier to get like fireball down, and then people will throw fireball for like really cheap. And specifically fireball is 100 fire, right? So they're throwing hundreds for like there's a way to get it down to one. So you're throwing 100 damage for one pool, right? Like that's pretty good. Um, which is why another reason why spellcasting is pretty sweet. But that's what concentration is, and you have this four-pointed star on your face, which color is determined by the concentration. I have pulled it up in MS Paint really quickly, but this is essentially what the star would kind of look like. I guess it's open to interpretation what your point of a four-point star would look like if you do it like as an X or as a like this. This is how I've seen it in game though for the most part, and this is just the four elements, so fire, ice, earth, lightning. And then there are additional colors for like magic and force and stuff, but you get the point here, which is really all we were trying to get across with that. All right, so now that we've gotten the makeup requirement out of the way, we can get into skills. So the first skill they get for 10 build and 10 body, so they have a 1-to-1 body and build ratio, which is different from some of the other ones, is Sorcery Thief. So if you remember back in Ascetic, they had Spirit Thief, and this is essentially the same thing. So you make Killing Blow 1, Killing Blow 2, Killing Blow 3, Sorcery Thief, and then drain their whatever the target's pool was and regain that back, which is super cool. If you want to see an in-depth talk about this skill, go look at the Ascetic video where they do Spirit Thief. It's literally just copy paste but change it to sorcery. And the floor of it is that you get a minimum of 5 even if they didn't have any, and the ceiling of it is you can get up to their pool, which is nuts. Then we have Magic Touch, which I think Dragon had Dragon had this. And I think this is a wizardry. So any of these augments that have wizardry typically get this. And it's just you get to detect, identify, and dispel within like personal touching range, and the target has to be willing or immobile, which means this is not throwing a magic dispel for 2 and 2 wizardry. You're not doing this at range, and it has to be a willing target. So this is neat for roleplay. This is neat for figuring out certain items, what things do, identifying magic weapons and stuff that you like find as loot, etc. It's cool. This is now here we get to a unique skill that we haven't seen like kind of a version of yet. This is lightning reflexes. So at a cost of 10 and 10, 10 wizardry and 10 rogue, you gain a pool of 3. You call out lightning reflexes. You spend 10 and 10, and you get a pool of 3 dodges for combat duration. Uh, so there's no cost per use of like those specific dodges. You're just paying the 10 and 10, and then you get a dodge, or you get 3 pools of dodges for combat duration. You have to make sure that you got to use them all because they get lost if you at the end of combat. It is also this is not a valid defense. You do not get hit and then call lightning reflexes. This is something you do like we're going into a fight, lightning reflexes. Uh, in terms of my opinion, dodge costs 10 rogue by itself, so that's one dodge right there. Then you're paying 10 wizardry, which I think most people would be willing to pay 10 wizardry to dodge. There's a whole path that does that. But so you're paying 20 pool and you're getting 3 dodges. So theoretically, people dodge at 10. That's what it is in the rulebook. There's ways to get it down, but theoretically, dodge costs 10 and you're paying 20 of uppers to get 3 dodges. So you're netting 10 pool, let's say a 5 and 5 split across both potentially, or you're netting 10 rogue basically by doing this. Um, so it's okay, it's good. There are ways to get dodge to be cheaper than 10, and that kind of makes this feel not as good, but it's still like this is still good. Like trust me, you run into combat and you want to like and you know you're going to be fighting, you just call lightning reflexes and now you have 3 dodges, and then typically 3 dodges will get you through a lot, and so you just have to and then like if you run out, and so you just use those 3 dodges, and then when you run out of those 3 dodges you're like, oh okay, now I can lightning reflexes again, and you're just netting 10 overall. You're just making it cheaper on yourself. So there's very much a, well, I want to use all my dodges before combat ends, and then also I don't feel bad about using my pool this way at the end of a mod or like through the course of a mod. So it's an okay skill. Definitely dodging is cool, and you get to net gain 10 pool of a dodge worth. You get a free dodge essentially, which is cool. It's neat. It's not the best way that you could have applied dodges, but dodging stuff is good, and you're getting to do it with wizardry instead of rogue, so that's pretty sweet. uh, Definitely want to be, if you're playing Eldritch Trickster, you're definitely probably going to be a little bit more into the rogue. You're going to want to have more rogue pool than you do with sorcery pool, or sorry, wizardry pool. And again, that's my opinion. That's just my interpretation of this skill. It's still a totally valid skill to have and use. All right. Prismatic Aura. 1/1 cost. Eldritch Trickster make their weapons swing for magic or an element. So you pay 1/1 and you get a +1 of an aura, suppressible aura. So like if you want to do fire, you pay 1/1 and call out prismatic aura fire, and then you get to do +1 with your swings with fire, right? And then you can change it to any element or magic at any point in time by doing the same thing, paying the 1/1 cost. The interesting part about this is that it stacks if you call out multiple times the same thing. So if you go prismatic aura ice, prismatic aura ice, prismatic aura ice, you get +3 ice. So this is an interpretation because this is like gets a little bit wordy. For example, the trickster may activate this ability 3 times for a total of +3 fire. However, upon changing it, and then when you change to something else, you don't get to keep your stacks. So if you go like from ice to fire, then you go from like +3 ice to 1 fire is essentially. But this is good. You just get it on the fly for 2. you get to just change what type of damage you're doing. Typically, that's what you're going to be doing most of the time. You're not really here for the additional damage unless you like are fighting something with threshold and you need to do like another +1 or something. But most of the time, you're doing this once to get specific aura that you need to be relevant against. Let's say you're fighting fire elementals and you're like, okay, well now I'm going to be swinging ice this whole time, right? Because it does double damage against fire. Pretty standard. It's a unique skill. The additional damage is like okay. Just the suppressible aura is the important thing. Let's see. Yep, that's about it. Eldritch Trickster can swing for an element. You get to swing for any element. It's not specific to your concentration. You get to swing for anything that you feel like swinging for in terms of the elements, which is pretty good, especially when you're doing it at 1-1. Uh, yeah. So theoretically, you could. Oh yeah, that's what I was going to talk about. This. So this right here is an example of somebody doing it for 3. There isn't theoretically, at least as far as my interpretation of this paragraph goes, there isn't a cap. So you could do it to like get plus 15, but you're spending 15 and 15 at that point to do it, and like there's better options. But theoretically, there's not a cap to this, so you could just spam the crap. You could go prismatic or ice, and like that's a mouthful, but you could do it like 15 times. Theoretically, I don't see the point in doing that, and I think that the extra damage is probably not worth it to do that. But theoretically, you could, at least as far as I can tell. Alright, moving on to Eldritch Armor. You now have an amount of Eldritch Armor equal to the combined total of your Sorcery and Knavery character sheet pools. This is pretty cool. We're going to see some similar skills in some of the other. I think Reavers get to do this kind of with one of their pool, or like they get. You get armor equal to your lower pools of the given that are relevant to the given augment, right? So in this case, Wizardry and Rogue is Sorcery and Knavery. And this, you may repair this armor on a 3 count for a cost of 1 and 1, which is super good that you do that. That's totally cool. Armor functions as the spell battle armor. So, just assuming the bare minimum to become a augment, you have to have 50 of the lower of each. So this is at a minimum 100 point of armor that you get to repair on a 3 count for 1 and 1. Super cool. Armor functions as the spell battle armor. It just means that it stacks on top of your regular armor. So if you are wearing armor, you also get to stack that on top of this. And then specifically, this armor must be used first versus your regular armor. So this armor would go away before your regular armor starts taking damage. Most Eldritch Tricksters I know use this as their armor. It's very much more convenient to be not actually representing armor or wearing armor and just relying on this. 100 is pretty good. Typically, you're going to have, that's the bare minimum is that you have 50 and 50. A lot of people are going to have more than that. So this might be 150 for another player. This might be 200 for another player, give or take. Still really good on a 3 count is sweet because I'm pretty sure armor is a 1 minute count typically, like regular armor to repair it. And doing this for one, and you pay 1 wizardry and 1 rogue every time. That's like nothing compared to the benefit of having an extra 100 armor. All right, so yeah, good skill. This is probably I would say this is probably the best skill that we've seen so far, in my opinion. And now we're going to get into something weird. We're getting into Eldritch Trickster Transference. Eldritch Trickster can transfer an activatable item effect from one item to another. So, you may pay 3 and 3. This is a whole paragraph, and it's complicated, but I'm going to tell you like what the basic effect is. I'm just going to simplify it. So, in one of the first games I played, when I wasn't playing a Nullifidian, I was playing a Minotaur, I got a magic egg that let me defend. It let me shield magic against ice spells 3 times, right? So this egg item has 3 activatable effects to let me defend against ice. This guy could pick. So as an Eldritch Trickster, you could pick up a rock. I don't know if it actually has to be like a specifically tagged item. I don't think that's It says from one item to another. I don't know if you have to have it like tagged. So essentially, this could be somebody's sword too. Um, and then you could take. He can pay 3 and 3, and take one of those uses and put it temporarily for the rest of that game onto like a sword. Or my example would be he picked up a rock, put it on the rock, and then handed you the rock, and now you have a defense against ice, right? So you get to transfer over an activatable effect from one item to another. Um, there are this whole paragraph is basically to keep people from breaking it or doing some dumb stuff, so don't worry about that. That's the effect that you're looking at. You're paying 3 and 3 to transfer unique things to other things. So if you are a Eldritch Trickster with a 10 physical resist ring, which exists, you can be like, oh well, hey, do you want like do you want like a physical resist this fight? I can take it off of my item and put it on my ring and put it on your ring if you'd like, and you get to do stuff like that, which is cool. You get to transfer, it's transference. You get to transfer some cool things from items to other things. And now we haven't really seen in the rulebook a whole lot of item usage, so it's really hard to evaluate this type of skill when you don't get to see all the cool effects that items do. Uh, there are a lot of cool effects that items do, and being able to just hand a use off to somebody else is pretty neat, especially for 3 and 3. Uh, this is pretty cool. Cannot have. There's like, yeah, and then the rest of this is just like warning text that like, hey, this doesn't work with this and this blah blah blah, so don't do something stupid, right? Or don't try to break something. Uh, yeah, that's it. That's a pretty cool skill. Pretty dope. 3 and 3, and it's only 5 build. Pretty hot. Pretty hot. And then Eldritch Weapon. You get a base 2 weapon, unshatterable. It's base 2 magic, unshatterable, undisarmable. So if you're thinking about claws, so this is, you get a claw, you get a single claw with base 2 magic, and then you can pay 5 and 5 spell strike. So you're not actually getting a claw. It's not a body weapon. It does not count as a body weapon. Um, it's a construct weapon, which if you want to look into some of the spells, there's ways to summon other construct weapons. However, this one is unshatterable, undisarmable, base 2 magic. And then with uniquely, you get to spend, like just how dragons can spend 5 and 5 to spell strike sorcery, you may also spend 5 and 5 to spell strike sorcery spells through. I imagine the text also should read through this weapon. I don't imagine that you get to do it through other things. But oh yeah, with Eldritch Weapon, there it is for combat duration. So you're doing sorcery stuff. You have wizardry, so you get to pay 5 and 5 to spell strike stuff. Pretty cool, pretty useful. This is pretty good, honestly. Base 2 magic, like base 2, kind of leaves some room to be desired. Like this wouldn't really be too busted in my opinion if this was like base 5, but for 6 build and you getting a pretty solid like weapon that you can spell strike through, that's pretty dope. Spell striking is not, I know we've seen in the other augments, but like there are other augments, right? Like channelers and then like augments is what we're talking about, okay? Like there's not a whole lot of ways to spell strike stuff outside of being an augment. So even though we've seen this in other augments, don't like this is good to have this. It's not as it's not very commonplace outside of channelers. And then subvert spell, which is really cool. So 3 and 3, you can absorb spells for later use. So this is a pseudo defense to spells where you get to pay 3 and 3 to absorb a spell that you get hit with. So somebody throws a fireball at you, you pay 3 and 3 and call absorb as a defense. And then to use it, you may later call innate fireball spell and cast the spell as normal. I assume this also means that you're not paying the costs because you're paying 3 and 3 to absorb it. It is not possible to spell strike these subverted spells. So if somebody throws a dispel magic at you and you absorb it, you don't get to spell strike absorb magic, or you don't get to spell strike dispel magic. Um, Stored spells will dissipate at the end of the game, or if they're affected by a dispel magic or a suppress magic effect. Okay, yeah, so you only get them until the end of the game. You don't get to keep them. You don't get to go like, oh, well, I absorbed a suppressed magic last game, and now I get to do it this game. Nope, it's just that given game that you did it. And that was base Eldritch Trickster. So a lot of unique, so this very unique skill, a solid hand weapon, and most of the time I see daggers, and Subvert Spell, which is a solid magic defense, and then like cool armor. Cool armor. You get to do like dodge better. You get Sorcery Thief, which is cool, and then you get to ID some stuff and swing for whatever element. I'm gonna get into my opinion here, okay? And this is exclusively my opinion. I think that Wizardry and Rogue are the two out of the four pools, the four base pools, right? Wizardry and Rogue and Sorcery and Knavery are the best out of the four, in my personal opinion. Uh, and like I'm sure this is a hot take. I'm sure people will disagree. Um, but Wizardry and Rogue I think is like the best pool personally, and the augment of Wizardry and Rogue is a little, and at least at the base, is a little underwhelming, and I think it's for that reason. I think you're like Wizardry and Rogue is so good, in my opinion, that when you look at Eldritch Trickster, you're like, okay, if this was really, really good, there would be no reason to not just every time go Wizardry and Rogue, right? Besides like people that want to play healers and like be aggressive, you know? And that's again my opinion, my interpretation, my understanding. I think personally that's why base is kind of, to me, it's underwhelming. This is all great skills. Like, don't get me wrong. I want every single one of these spells on my character sheet, or skills on my character sheet. Like, these are all good skills. And Dragon was pretty straightforward. But compared to like Ascetic, like if I had to pick like be an Eldritch Trickster or be an Ascetic, I'm picking Ascetic, like personally. But there's like Wizardry and Rogue is like really good, man. So you're getting a little bit more out of those pools compared to your augment than the other places are getting out of their pools. All right. Anyway, that's a personal opinion. You know, throw fire at me later about it. Let's move on to Elder Trickster skills. Now, transference, enhanced transference. Eldritch Trickster may transfer skills from one being to another. Upon learning this ability, they may spend X and X in order to temporarily transfer the use of one rulebook skill, but not augments. Wait, Elder augments. So you can transfer base augment skills here. So you can give somebody your base augment skill. Okay, keep that in mind here. From one target to another, where X and X is the base per use cost of the skill being transferred. In order to transfer skill, the skill must be still activated, and the pool spent is normal. It is not possible to use this ability to transfer skills that do not have per use cost. Reductions do not apply for the transfers of the skill. So it's not possible to give somebody threshold. You can't take threshold off of a dragon and hand it to somebody else because there's no per use cost to it, right? So it has to be so if you wanted to give somebody your prismatic aura, you could pay 1 and 1 to hand somebody over a prismatic aura for free, right? Let's see. In order to transfer skills, skill must still be activated and the pool spend is normal. It is not possible to use this ability to transfer skills that do not have a per use cost. So, if Billy Bob Joe has a prismatic aura, like he paid 1 and 1, he has a prismatic aura ice on his sword, so he's swinging for +1 ice. You can pay 1 and 1 the cost that it takes to activate it, and then transfer that skill to somebody else. So now so you take the +1 aura off of Billy Bob Joe and you hand it to Billy Bob Jane, right? And now Jane is swinging for +1, but the Billy Bob Joe is no longer swinging for +1 ice, right? So you're taking it away. And in the same way, you can use the example here is Rogue. So Marcus spends 10 Rogue, which is the cost of dodge, to dodge, and then he pays 10 and 10, which is the cost of the skill, to activate it. So maybe this is 2 and 2 then, to do the 1 and 1 here, because it's a total cost of 2, so you might pay 2 and 2 to do it. That's a question to be asked later. And then you can pay 10 and 10 to transfer the dodge to somebody else, and now that person has a dodge defense. because it's already active. It's kind of like it's sitting on you like a passive spell, but it's not a passive spell. It's just an unused ability. So imagine like you could hand somebody, you could do lightning reflexes and then hand somebody lightning reflexes, although you're paying. The thing that holds this back is the XX. Like the spell, like the cost for some of this stuff is nuts. Like you're paying like 30 upper here. So you're paying 10 rogue, you're paying 20 rogue, 10 wizardry to give somebody a dodge. And it's like, I'm sorry, man, I much rather just dodge 2 times and keep 10 wizardry than hand you a dodge. Like it's not, that's my personal opinion again, but like it's pretty inefficient if you're talking about like big useful stuff. For neat stuff like hey, everybody needs to swing ice, so I'm gonna pop prismatic or ice 3 times and then hand it out 3 times to other people. Like that's pretty cool. Um, being able to give people augment skills is nuts. Like, hey, you want? Oh, well, that's no cost activated. Hey, you want to sorcery thief this guy and get back? Like, that's pretty cool. Like, hey, I'll spend, if this is cost 1 and 1, which is a total of 2, I'll pay 2 and 2 of my uppers to give you a sorcery thief usage, and then you can sorcery thief for yourself. To like, and they're not an Eldritch Trickster, they can't sorcery thief, but they got sorcery. It's like, hey, I'll give you this. Eat the sorcery off of this. Like that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. That's pretty sick. These are neat. It has unique and neat uses, but for like the main ones that you would really like, handing out dodges is like probably the best thing you could do with it. But that costs a ton based off of the way that this costs. So yeah, that's all. That's kind of my opinion on the skill, but it's neat and it's cool, and there are times when you want to use it. And it's only one build. So pretty cool. All right, anyway. Disenchant Touch. Eldritch Trickster may pay 10 and 10 to Eldritch Trickster Disenchant Touch, and target enchantment is destroyed. Any enchantments associated with the enchantment are also destroyed. Uh, he gets to pick which enchantment if several exist. This is useful for lore reasons, for plot reasons. So sometimes plot will hand you an item and maybe you need to blow it up. Maybe it's like this is the core of this castle and it's a magical item and that's what's keeping the castles all together and you need to like destroy this castle. So now you need to figure out how to disenchant this core of the castle. Right, it's neat when it comes up. There's not a whole lot to say about it. Subvert Ritual. So just like how you can absorb spells for 3 and 3, you can absorb rituals for 5 and 5, and you may also throw those rituals that you store, which is super good. Note, because rituals are weird, it's possible to absorb any ritual, but it's not possible to then use any ritual that's not normally stored or memorized. So sometimes like it comes into like a utility spell, like and the thing is that these are all rituals and the ritual lists, like the most basic ones, aren't in the rulebook, so I can't tell you. But there's like I'm hurting you rituals, and then there's like utility rituals that need a item to target. And so you might be able to absorb a attack ritual and throw an attack back, which is 99% of the time what you're going to be doing with this. But you may also, for some reason, absorb certain utility spells that you're then not able to apply because the way that you apply it would be like how you did it, question mark, question mark, question mark, uh, or how you like casted the ritual in the first place. So there's some weird this is here for a reason, but yeah, you just get to absorb rituals and throw them back at people. That's really what the skill's about. You pay 5 and 5, and also you're paying 5 and 5 for a pseudo defense against a ritual. Keep that in mind. You are paying 10 upper to defend against a ritual. That's hot. That's really hot. Okay, pretty good. Just like paying 3 and 3 to defend against a spell. Like it's acceptable and good to at that ratio. All right. Enhanced Eldritch Weapon. Alrighty, alrighty. So, The Eldritch weapon gains the following when wielded, in addition to the benefits of the already existing weapon. You now may spell strike the stuff that you subverted. So if somebody throws a dispel magic at you and you pay 3 and 3 to absorb a dispel magic, you may now then spell strike that absorb magic, which can be very useful. So like very good. I honestly don't know why they make you do this at Elder, but apparently it's too good to be spell striking spells that you absorb. Which, like that, I have no clue how good that is personally. I don't do spells, and so maybe that's really good. I don't have an opinion. I can't particularly say why that this is at the Elder, but I imagine if they put it here, it's probably for a good reason. So, you may spend 3 and 3 to bane any appropriate elemental fire attack. So you can, if there's a fire elemental, and this is a really tough fire elemental for some reason, and you're having a hard time killing it, you can go 3 and 3 and say bane fire and smack the fire elemental. And bane, there's a spell to bane, I'm pretty sure. So bane just kind of like shoots whatever that thing is in the bud. I'm pretty sure it's like a kill move, or it's good to bane things that are the appropriate thing. There's a bunch of racial banes in the game, like bane elf or bane gargoyle or bane golem or bane what is it, dark elf, or right, like you can bane racial stuff, and this allows you to do it for elements. You get a bane elements, which comes up. It comes up. Now, you used to be able to pay 5 and 5 to spell strike sorcery, and now you pay 5 and 5 to spell strike any sorcery or spirit spells for combat duration, which is hot. You still need your book. You still need a book to, like, with the spells on your person to be able to spell strike them, but now you also get to do spirit, which is neat. Because when you're going Elder, they kind of assume, like, you're dedicated on that, so it's no longer about locking you into doing sorcery, which is like the downside over here is like you get locked into like, hey, you're only spell striking. Where the hell is it? You're only spell striking sorcery here because you're at base. But if you're going Elder, then it's like, okay, well, if you're going Elder and you picked up some Spirit, then you might as well be able to spell strike the Spirit too. It makes sense. Alrighty. Uh, Master of Spells, 10 and 10, no cost. Eldritch Trickster's passive spells act as active spells. This is awesome. So if you have a repel weapon, right, which is a spell, which is a very good spell, I highly recommend you learn what repel weapon does. I'm gonna explain it though. Uh, you pay 2 cost, you pay 2 sorcery to give somebody a repel weapon, and the first weapon that hits them, no matter what it was, so if it was a slay or even a vorpal slay or anything that was struck with a weapon that wasn't a specifically a spell strike or something, because that wouldn't affect it because spell strikes are weird. But if it was a weapon and it hit you for a physical attack, so like just like physical resist, basically it has the same qualification that this to be physical resisted to be repelled. You get to just automatically repel, and it doesn't affect. It's a solid defense. Now this is a dumb defense, which means that you don't get to choose what you use it on. It's the first thing that hits you, right? So if somebody hits you with a sword, you say repel, and then if somebody hits you with a sword again, uh, you don't get to choose, like, that repel is gone. You didn't get it. So if they went like 2 damage slay, like they got rid of your repel weapon and then they slayed you, right? Now, Eldritch Trickster makes all of those dumb defenses, the ones that happen automatically, like shield magic and repel weapon are the 2 primos here, as smart spell defenses while you're conscious, which means that you get to choose which attack you use. So if some guy walks up to you and he goes 2 damage, slay, you get to save your repel weapon doesn't automatically go off on the first 2 damage, which is what it would do for everyone else who doesn't have this skill. Now you get to be like, oh well, I'll take 2 damage. Oh well, I'll take 2 damage. Oh, slay, repel. Right, like that's super good. This is definitely one of the best skills they have, in my opinion. This is super awesome, and this will be super relevant every time, all the time when you're playing. You can Fury spells. So Fury is kind of a pseudo mechanic in the rulebook which basically amounts to I do a thing 3 times and then I only pay 2 for it. So if you understand lightning reflexes where you're paying effectively 10 rogue and 10 wizardry to do 3 dodges, this is the other way around, kind of. So you if you wanted to perform a Summon Magic Ball Fury, you would say Fury immediately after casting Summon Magic Ball 3 times. So you spend, so you go like, so Reaver does this, and they do this with like weapon skills specifically. So this guy's Eldritch Trickster is doing it with spells, and Reaver gets to do this with skills. And I'm going to explain this to you how a Reaver does it because it's easier to understand than the spells. So if you go slay, 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 Fury, you did 3 slays, but you only paid for 2 of them, right? That's what Fury allows you to do. So in this case, if you went, and this is tough, I'm going to try and get through this. If I went with Eldritch Foresight, Grant Repel Weapon, with Eldritch Foresight, Grant Repel Weapon, with Eldritch Foresight, Grant Repel Weapon, Fury, like see how it's kind of tough to do with the spells, you get to only have casted 2 of those instead of 3 of those, which is pretty neat. This essentially makes this rapid and successive spell casting more efficient. And that was a big mouthful, but most of the time you're spell striking stuff. This is for really when you're spell striking, because it's way easier to say spell strike, spell strike fireball, or spell strike summon fireball, like way easier than it is to say the whole enchantment or whatever, right? So this is really you're up in the front line smacking somebody a bunch of times with fireballs, and then you're going like Fury every time. So total expenditure of skill, and 2 times your cost to cast Summon Magic Balls. So this isn't like a base cost. This is up to the individual whatever their casting cost is for this. So this pseudo synergizes with your race. So if you're or your concentration too, which is important to understand. It's not like Magic Ball costs 5 and then what I do it for 1, so now I'm paying extra to Fury. No, it's based off of your personal cost to cast the thing, which is awesome. It would be really bad if it wasn't. But yeah, Furying, you're gonna see Fury a couple more times I'm definitely in Reaver. I don't know if it's in the other things, but you get to Fury spells. Pretty hot, pretty cool. Arcane Adaptation, and this goes all the way back to the concentration stuff. See Arcane Adaptation for the concentrations in their corresponding color. You get to, so we talked about your concentration and how you get to reduce the costs of certain spells based off of what concentration you pick. And that's a meta magic that you pick, and you typically only ever get that one. You don't get to concentrate multiple times in different things. You specifically only get 1 concentration, I think. Don't quote me because I'm not a spellcaster. This is tough for a null-fided player to explain. But this lets you, every logistics for free, change your concentration and all of the items associated with it. So I'm going to cheat a little bit here, and I'm going to tell you about an item, a very common item, which is called a magic ring, right? And a concentration ring. And so these rings will allow you, so just how concentration lets you do -1 to 1 spell sphere and +1 to all the other ones, a ring just is a wearable item that also does that. Or it might only just reduce, it might not add an additional cost to other things. But essentially, I'm doing mana, and my concentration is mana, so now I do mana at -1, and then now I have a racial to reduce spells, so now I'm doing it at -2, and now I have a concentration ring for mana, so now I'm doing mana spells at -3, right? And so now my 4 mana cost, my 4 sorcery spell now costs 1, right? And you can see how, like, that's really good. Okay, this not only changes the meta magic 1 concentration that you get to that given concentration, all meta magic items and items that modify your concentration also get swapped over. So if you have a fire ring and you, for some reason, this game want to do ice, your fire ring turns into an ice ring, which is super neat and super useful and super cool because it would suck to have those items and then have this skill if it didn't work that way. It also interacts with upkeeps based off of some stuff, and you get to do it once for free at logistics at the beginning of the game. You get a pick, and then uh, in during the game you can spend 10 and 10 to swap it out, and then the next time you spend 15 and 15 to swap it out, and then I'm pretty sure the next time you pay 20 and 20 to swap it out. So there's a certain kind of like you're doing it for free every game, which is super neat. And then occasionally you might want to like, oh well, this adventure is going to be a while, like this is going to be an hour worth of fighting. I might want to figure out which concentration I want to use for this whole fight, so I might swap over for the day, right, etc. Because there's no way to know, like, I mean, if it's the dead of winter, you're probably going to see ice elementals, so it's probably a safe bet to pick fire and be good at fire, right? Like there's some you can kind of like pseudo understand what type of elements you're going to be running into, but most of the time you're not really going to like understand. Like if you're in the middle, if you're like somewhere between autumn and summer, are they throwing autumn and summer? Between summer and winter, are they going to be throwing fire elementals at you or earth elementals or whatever? You know, it doesn't like there's some so like once you get in game, you're not just stuck to that given thing that you swap to, right? So anyway, arcane adaptation, good, really neat, very useful, very well needed, and it makes sense for Eldritch Trickster to have this. This is a very uh embodying. It's a skill that very much embodies the way that Eldritch Trickster wants to be doing things. One of the coolest name skills in the game, Serendipity. Eldritch Trickster can exchange one pool of energy for another. It's pretty cool. At a 2-to-1 ratio, you can transfer any pool of one tier to the same or lower tier, up to the character sheet maximums. For example, you may spend 50 Wizardry to gain 25 Rogue. So it doesn't work up, so you can't take your lower pools and turn them into upper pools, but you can take your upper pools and turn them into lower pools, which is neat. Uh, it's mostly like, oh, I need more rogue, so I'm gonna swap my Wizardry to rogue so I can dodge more, right? Like it's very much a heat of the moment type of like uh thing that you'd be doing. This skill will affect only the 4 main lower and upper pools. It does not affect research or production or any other additional pools that exist. We haven't talked about research because it's kind of a pseudo mechanic on the outside, but it takes build and it's kind of like a pool. We'll get into that, especially when we cover Bard, because Bard is a pretty neat pathway. It's not an augment, but it's a pathway, and we'll get into the pathways eventually. We're halfway through. This is the halfway mark for the augments, so we're pretty much there. Oh, yeah, and that was the last skill. So that's Eldritch Trickster. Again, my personal opinion, Wizardry and Rogue are pretty much, in my opinion, when I evaluate everything that I know, and there are plenty of people that have multiple years, decades even, more experience in this game than I do, so they would evaluate these things differently than I. But in my evaluation, Wizardry and Rogue is the best 2 pools in the game, and uh, the skill, and I think that Eldritch Trickster is just a little bit underwhelming, especially compared to Ascetic, in terms of their skills. I would be, again, I would be super happy to have any of these skills on my character sheet. Do not let that stop you from playing an Eldritch Trickster. I just think that if Eldritch Trickster was nuts, and then Wizardry and Rogue were just as good as they currently are, it would be a no-brainer to always play Eldritch Trickster. I think that out of all of the augments, if you're going Wizardry and Rogue, that if you were planning, like, there's the biggest argument, in my opinion, for the Rogue pathways, to go a pathway that involves Rogue compared to an augment. And then you just play a Rogue that also does Wizardry, as opposed to playing an Eldritch Trickster. It's neat, and it's, again, my opinion. And it's completely my opinion. I'm sure there are people that will be like, Solomon is 100% wrong here. Don't listen to him. But, yeah. So that was Eldritch Trickster. We're going to be moving on to Paladin here. Eldritch Tricksters are sweet. I've met a couple of them. They definitely get played. And they do super neat stuff, man. Like, there's not a whole lot of people that can do serendipity or absorbing spells and, like, It's super neat. Like moving spells over to other things, like that's so cool. All right, sorry. Enough talking about. We're at the 45-minute mark. Thank you for watching. We're gonna move on to Paladin next.